we're worried for her safety with this man because we don't think that she knows who he really is. After our first session, the guy counselor says to the girl counselor, she needs to leave him or he's going to kill her. When I got back together with Roger, nobody, and I mean nobody in my life was happy about it. Melinda was not happy. Brenda was not happy. My dad, like Melinda said to me, if you can find me one person in your life that thinks this is a good idea, I will leave you alone about it. And I was like, okay. And she said, there's not one, is there? And I was like, look, I don't know how to explain it to you other than to tell you I know in my soul, in my bones, that I know what I experienced before. And I can't take the chance of this possibly being his time to get it because I know that if it is, it's going to be amazing.
I just
Like,
got chills.
rock you to your very core amazing because he was a hopeless romantic too. And I knew that even though he was flawed, even though he had relapsed, I know that he loved me better than anybody ever had. And I knew that if he could do that high and not walking correctly, imagine how much better it would be with Jesus leading in the driver's seat. And it was. It was absolutely the most amazing whirlwind, crazy experience of my life and the saddest.
Can you tell us
why the saddest?
So there's one thing I do want to say before we go. Remind me about the 5 things with the whole love yourself thing. I want to come back to that in a minute. But in 2019, we, he and I had to go through a lot of things. We went through relapse. We went through a cheating thing that happened with him during the relapse. Then there was prison. He ended up going to prison because during the relapse he caught a charge. And then I stood beside him the whole way rehab, then prison. And then um, after he got out, he was on parole. There was a small little drinking episode that happened for about 6 months that I didn't really talk about with anybody. And I was just like, look, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not doing a drinking problem. Like I need you to get it together. I've stood by you through this, and this, and it's time for us to not have to have to stand by you through stuff. Like it's time for us to live life. And he let it down, and we did. We finally had this most amazing life ever. And then in 2019 in October, we were sitting in the living room eating Chick-fil-A one day on a Saturday. And he jumped up and ran to the bathroom and puked, and he came back in, and I said, what's wrong? What happened? And he said, I don't know. It was like there was something in my throat that wouldn't let it go down. And I was like, well, you think it's maybe your reflux? Because he had reflux real bad because he had a neuromuscular disease called myasthenia gravis. Most people don't get it until their 80s. It just, your muscles quit working. And so he had a port in his chest. He had to take these crazy IVIG treatments, and it was a lot. He was on disability for it. Um, so he had to take steroids every day. So that gave him really bad reflux. Well, I didn't think nothing of it. 2 weeks later, we both worked at the center. He was in the maintenance department. He had been a mechanic all his life, so he kept all the vans rolling. And I go outside down to the maintenance shop, and he's sitting there drinking a Boost, like an Ensure. And I was like, and it was lunchtime, and I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, And I really looked at him because I worked so much when I worked at Lovelady. Like I worked 8 to 5, and then on Monday nights I taught CR, so I didn't get home till after 8 o'clock. I mean, probably like 8:30, between 8:30 and 9. Then on Tuesday and Thursday I house mommed. Um, Wednesday I would usually come home and fall out into the bed, and then Friday, the same thing. I was very tired and starting menopause, and it was just I was exhausted all the time, and I hate to say it, but for those 2 weeks, I really had not paid much attention to my husband, as far as his personal self, because we were just going in different directions. And then I looked at him, like I really looked at him, and I noticed he was so much skinnier. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm eating lunch." And I was like, "Roger, that's a boost. That's not lunch." He said, "Well, that's all I can get down." And I pulled up his shirt and saw that he had not one, not two, but three self-made notches on his belt to make it tighter. And I was like, "How much weight have you lost?" And he was like, "I don't know, but I had to make three notches on my belt." And I was like, "You're going to the
And
doctor."
what time
And he was
period?
like, "No, I'm not. I'll be fine."
The weight
Huh?
loss, how fast was it?
This was 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Wow,
And
that is
I
crazy.
said,
Wow.
yeah. I said, "You're going to the doctor." He said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Yes, you are. You're going to the doctor." I said, "How long have you been doing those?" And he said, since that day. Since that day that we were eating Chick-fil-A. I was like, "You've not, that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. You've not had any food?" And he was like, "No, this is all I can get down." I was like, "Oh no, you're going to the doctor." So I called my doctor and made him an appointment. He went, he said, "Oh, it could be any number of things. Let's get you looked out. We'll get you to get an endoscopy." So we go, we get an endoscopy. They tell him he's got a hiatal hernia. This is October of 2019. Still can't eat anything. Can't get anything but liquid down. They're like, your doctor will be calling you. Your general practitioner will call you, set you up an appointment to to go with a surgeon. Well, we waited for a month, and I mean to tell you, he lost so much. He probably lost 60 pounds, and so we're talking at 6 weeks at this point. The man is smaller than I am at this point. And so I finally called the doctor and I'm like, "Listen, y'all have not called us. My husband's over here wasting away. He can't eat any food. I need somebody to do something." And they were like, "Oh, can you be here tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll be there tomorrow. You're lucky we're not there today." And so we get there. He's like, "I'm so sorry. We were supposed to call you. We dropped the ball. We apologize. I'm getting you over to the surgeon today." We get over to the surgeon, and the surgeon's like, "I want to do some tests to rule out a couple things." And I'm like, "Rule out what?" He's like, "Well, I don't want to say. I don't want to scare anybody." And I'm like, "Scared? What are we looking at
Yeah,
here?"
well, that
And he's
scares
like,
me
"Well, I
right
don't
there.
know. It could be a bunch of different things."
I don't
Yeah,
want to scare
right? Yeah,
anybody.
you're
Well, now
scaring
I'm
me by not wanting
terrified.
to
Just
scare
tell me.
me. I didn't even think cancer, though. Cancer was never on my mind. Like, I don't know what I thought. I didn't know what I thought. I've not really had a lot of health problems in my life. So I really didn't know what was to be scared of. Like, I really didn't. I don't even guess I really knew esophageal cancer was a thing. So by this time, it's December now. And he says, "I'm going to set up some tests." And we're like, "Okay." So we go do the barium swallow test. Then we go back to work. We're at work. It's Christmas time. I'm working in the Santa store. Apparently, he got scared because he couldn't get water down. The doctor calls him, and usually I did all of his medical stuff, all of his appointments, the reminders, everything was on my phone. But for whatever reason, they called his phone. He jumps in the car, runs to the hospital because they want to come do an immediate, some kind of test, because they said the stricture was completely closed. And at this point in time, he couldn't even get liquid down and had not told me. Because, no offense, but you guys, y'all don't want to go to the doctor. You don't want to talk about what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So
No.
he's at the doctor at the hospital. They're going to want to do an emergency procedure to stretch his esophagus because it's completely closed. So he calls me and he's like, "Hey babe, what you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm up here in the Santa store helping wrap gifts. What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm at the hospital." And I'm like, "You're where?" He's like, "I'm at the hospital." What are you doing at the hospital?" "Well, they called me. It's an emergency procedure." And I was like, We're literally working at the same place. You didn't think to call and be like, hey, it's an emergency procedure? He was like, I'm sorry. It scared me. I just jumped in the car and drove up here. I need you to come up here. They're doing an emergency procedure. And I'm like, okay. So we get up there, crazy pants. We get up there and they do the procedure. They stretch his esophagus open. They're doing an endoscopy. Uh, Alina, one of the other client reps takes me up there because I didn't want both of our cars to be there because he was going to have anesthesia and needed a driver. So I get there, we get there, he goes and has the procedure. I'm in the waiting room. And I notice everyone's leaving one at a time. People that came way after me are leaving the waiting room. And finally, I'm the only one in the waiting room. And I'm like, well, I'll be darned. I can't believe we're still here. Like, this is ridiculous. We've got places to go. It's late. I'm ready to go home. I'm hungry. I needed, whatever. And he comes out into the waiting room. The doctor does. And we had been to have an endoscopy before, and no doctor came out in the waiting room. So he comes out in the waiting room and he sits down. And I'm like, hey. And he's like, hey. I said, so did you find the hiatal hernia? And he was like, yes, ma'am, I did. He said, it's really little. And I was like, really little? He hadn't been able to eat no food for 6 weeks. He's wasted down to nothing. He's skinnier than I am. Like, it's little?
What's your
What's the
definition of
problem
big?
then? Yeah, like, how is this? I'd hate to see a
Yeah,
big
really.
problem if this is a little problem. And he said, well, that's not the problem. I said, what do you mean that's not the problem? And he said, well, the hiatal hernia is not your husband's issue. And I was like, well, what is? He said, well, he's got a sore down there. I said, a sore? How do you get a sore in your esophagus? And he said, well, it's like it's like cancer. And I said, cancer? It's like cancer? And he goes, well, no, it is cancer. And I said, what? Are you telling me my husband has cancer in his esophagus? And he said, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, I am. And I just, like, was in utter
Yeah.
disbelief. Like, I just sat there and he's rambling on about how it used to be a death sentence and it's not a death sentence anymore. And they've come a long way with surgery and treatment. And just these tears quietly start streaming down my face. And I said, where is he? And he said, he's still waking up. And he said, I want you to understand this is 110% tobacco related. And I said, oh my God, I cannot believe this. Because when we first got together, I had just quit smoking and I tried so hard to get him to quit smoking. And I've never really tried to get someone to quit smoking before, but it was like I was on a mission to try to get him to quit smoking. And I got him, I don't know how many prescriptions of Chantix and patches and gum and lozenges. Like, I tried so hard. And he was like, why are you so obsessed with getting me to quit smoking? And I was like, well, because I just quit and we smoke the same thing. So if you don't quit, I'm not going to stay
I don't want
quit.
to be the only one.
But I didn't realize that yeah, right. God had me on a mission. But it didn't work out. And so I said, have you told him this? And he was like, yes, but he's coming in and out of anesthesia. So I've told him 4 or 5 times. And I said, okay. So I called Melinda on the way back there, and I was literally, I'm a very loud, outspoken person, and I was shaking. I was just, freaking out. I was in shock. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lay in the floor and squall, and I couldn't do any of that. And so I called Melinda, and she's like, is he okay? And I was like, no, he has cancer. And she was like, oh my God, you're kidding. And I was like, no, ma'am. And she said, and Carrie was sitting right there with her. And she said to Carrie, he's got cancer. And she said, I'm sending Carrie up there right now. Well, I go back there with him. They want to do an emergency CT scan. So they wheel us over to the hospital, hospital part. And they've got him going into imaging. And Carrie gets there by then. And she's out there with me. And I'm sobbing. And he comes out of the CT room. I'll never forget it. He comes out of the CT room and he goes, Carrie, what are you doing here? Are you having a test too? And she said, "No, I'm not having a test." And he said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm just here to support y'all." And he said, "You are so sweet. She's so sweet to come up here for my test." And he didn't, like, he had done been told 4 or 5
Yeah.
Yeah.
times. And so we talked to her for a minute. She ended up leaving. We talked again with the hospital people, and I'm like, now that he's a little more coherent, can we go over everything again? And he's like, "Is everything okay? Did y'all find the hiatal hernia?" And they told him, "Do you remember our conversation a minute ago?" And he was like, "No, ma'am." And she said, "You have esophageal cancer." And he said, "I have cancer." And she said, "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry that you do. We're going to set you up with an oncologist." And he just checked out. And they had me to go get the car, and I went and got the car, and he didn't want to talk. I was like, "I love you. We're going to get through this." And he was like, I just can't right now." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "But I want you to know I'm not, we'll walk this out together." And the phone rang, and it was Miss Brenda. And she said, "Can I talk to him?" I said, "I don't think he really wants to talk to anybody." And she said, "Will you ask him since it for me?" I said, "Yeah, you're about the only one that would be able to get him on the phone. I'll ask him." And I said, "Miss Brenda wants to talk to you." And he said, "I can't right now." And I said, "He said he can't right now. He'll call you later." And she said, "Tell him that the Lord told me when Melinda told me what's going on to tell y'all that you will both get a full paycheck every week, no matter what, whether you're there or not, because I know you're freaking out." And I
Wow.
said, "Okay, I'll tell him." And I told him, and he said, "Thank God." And that was all he said the whole way home. And then when I got home, he said, "I'm going to need an hour by myself." And I said, he said, "I need you to leave." And I said, "Okay, well, I got to go get my car at the center." Because I drove his car home. So, uh, Alina came and picked me up and drove me back to the center. And I went in and just literally fell out in the floor in Melinda's office and just lost it and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And she shut the door and came and sat on the floor with me. And, everything that could go wrong did. Everybody dropped the ball. It was a proverbial crap show. Um, we did 6 weeks of chemo, radiation. Then they sent us to MD Anderson in Houston, Texas for this crazy surgery. The tumor was about right here. They cut and took out his esophagus, took his stomach out and reshaped it into a long tube, reattached it right here. He had a feeding tube. Um, he never did get rid of that feeding tube. And then the tumor had made it, and of course we'd had several imaging by this time, and they'd all told him because I told him, "This is from the cigarettes." "You don't know that." I said, "The doctor told me that." So then we had several more imaging, and they all said this is 100% tobacco related. He didn't want to admit that this was his fault, you know. And so it took several different doctor's appointments to tell him that before he would admit it. Um, but the tumor had protruded through the backside of the esophagus. On the underside of the esophagus is a bed of lymph nodes. When we went to Texas, it was in March of 2020, so the whole world was shut down. Um, and COVID was an awful thing, and it, devastated our nation or whatever. But for us, and I hate to say this because I know people lost their loved ones, but it was a blessing for us because I got to be beside him the whole time. He didn't have to do any of it without me right there holding his hand, and I don't know how that would have worked any other time in life. But 3 of the 13 lymph nodes that they took, they scooped out all the lymph nodes that the tumor was touching. Um, and they sent them all to the lab, and 3 of the 13 lymph nodes had microscopic cancer cells in them. And they just said, "Here, give this letter to your doctor in Birmingham when you go back." And we were there for 6 weeks. We come home, we go to the appointment. Mind you, everybody so far has said what a great success it was. Nobody's said words like metastatic, spread, or anything like that. So we get to the doctor's appointment in Birmingham, and it's taking forever, and I'm ADHD and unmedicated. So I'm like trying really hard to keep my mind occupied. So I'm cleaning out my purse. And so I'm like, oh, here's that letter. I forgot about the letter. Let me just read this letter and see what it says. Metastatic cancer. And I was like, what in the, and this is at the point I was just telling my best friend Sierra, this is at the point in time when Holly started cussing again. Um, I was like, what the F is this? Why has no one said this to me? Roger's like, what's wrong with you? I was like, nothing, nothing, because I didn't want to startle him because I was already freaking out. We get in there, I hand her the letter, and I'm like, no one has gone over this with us. Why is that? And she's like, nobody went over what it says in this letter. And I'm like, no. I said, does this face look like I'm in the know? Um, and and he's like, what's going on? What's in the letter? And she's like, well, it's spread and it's now in your lymph nodes. Long story short, it ended up spreading all over his body, both lungs, his entire abdomen, the entire small of his back, both hips, all up and down his spine. His tumors were bigger than some women's breasts. I mean, they were huge. Um, Everything that could go wrong did. You know, one of the worst days of my life was the day we had to tell his 10-year-old son that he wasn't going to make it. That was one of the most devastating experiences of my life. Um, and then we went back in September. We had a PET scan. We're supposed to have a PET scan every 3 months. We went back and we came back the beginning of May, had a PET scan. He was all clear. By June, his back started hurting. By August, he couldn't sleep at night. In September, they made us wait till September to get another PET scan. And when we finally did, they called us. We were at the car dealership trying to buy a car, and they called us, and we had to go in. And they told me that his cancer was now terminal, and he had 4 to 12 weeks to live.
So he went from clear to
And
that in 3 months.
from, mm-hmm, yep, covered, completely covered, and it was in his bones. They said the most painful kind of cancer you can have is when it's
Mm-hmm.
in your bones because as it grows, I mean, it's splitting open your bones. And he was on hospice. He ended up living for 6 months after that. They put him on this super, super strong chemo, and they were like, they made him do some radiation treatments to shrink it so it wouldn't hurt as bad. And then they put him on this super strong chemo that just made him so sick. He couldn't even make it to the bathroom. I had to buy him trash cans to puke in on the way to the bathroom. Um, and he did it for 3 weeks. They had it, hooked to him, and it went in 24/7. And we went back after the first 3 weeks, and he's like, okay, so how long do I have now? And she was like, I can't guarantee you any extra time. And he's like, I thought that's why I was doing this was to get extra time. And she was like, I can't guarantee
Yeah.
you that. And he's like, but I'm so sick. Like, I can't enjoy. I thought I was going to be able to do this and then have some time. And she was like, no. And she was like, you can do it again, and hopefully it'll give you some more time. And he was like, but I haven't. I'm sick. Like I spend all my time on the toilet and puking into this trash can getting to the toilet. And she said, well, at this point in time, you need to consider, what do you want to do? What do you want the rest of your life to look like? Do you want to be sick as a dog, trying to extend it, or do you want to quit treatment and just enjoy what you have? And he looked at me and he said, what do I do? And I said, Roger, I can't make that decision for you. This is something that only you can decide. And he said, I need you to tell me what to do. I said, I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what I feel like I would do. And we both looked at the doctor and said, what would you do? And she said, if it were up to me and this was my situation, she said, I would quit treatment and I would enjoy what I had.
Mm-hmm.
Quality, not quantity. And and he looked at me and he said, will you be mad at me if I stop? I said, don't do it for me. You've got to do what you think is best for you. And he said, I just don't think I can do it again. And I said, that's okay. That's okay. And so we went home and they put him on hospice, and it was the worst experience in my life. When he finally died, it took him 24 hours to drown in his own fluids, crying out, help me, I can't breathe, gurgling. Like it was absolutely horrific. I used to say it was effing horrific, but Melinda was like, why do we have to use the F word? And I'm like, because there is no
Mm.
other
Yeah.
word to describe it. I don't use it as a cuss word, I use it as an adjective. It was absolutely the worst, most horrendous experience of my life that I would not wish on my worst enemy. Like, he lost his life over a cigarette. And that is how he went out of this world, over a cigarette. It's so not worth
Had
it.
a
His son has no dad and has this horrible mother. And, I was so broken, I couldn't even go. I tried going back to the center to work, but I was so broken, I was literally cussing people out. And I wouldn't come in till like 10 o'clock and dared anybody to say anything to me. I was just angry. And Melinda sat me down one day and she's like, I'm losing you. And she said, I'm losing my friend Holly and I'm losing my employee, and I won't lose my friend. I'm okay losing my employee, but I won't lose my friend. And she said, I talked to a physician because I was just broken. I was so broken. And she said, I talked to a physician that I explained to him your scenario and what happened. And he said that when you go through such a traumatic heartbreak, when it's someone, like your spouse that you love and do life with, because every death is horrible, whether it's your mother, especially a cancer death like that. If it's your mom, whether it's your dad, whether it's your husband, your wife, your kid, whatever, they're all bad. He said, but the most impactful that changes your life, your everyday life, it's not your parents, it's not your grandparents, it's not even your kids, it's your spouse. He said, because it changes your money, it changes your friends, it changes your grocery shopping. It changes your social activities. It changes every aspect of your life. And he said, to when you go through something so traumatic, it changes the chemistry in your brain, and it sometimes takes 2 years for you to get back to normal. Some people go crazy, and she said, I love you, and I'm not willing to lose you in the process. So I have gotten this worked out for you to have this other job. It's a work from home job, but I cannot have you here working at the center, cussing people out, flipping birds on Facebook, and daring anybody to say something to you. And I was like, I understand. Well, at first, I did not understand. At first, I felt
yeah, yeah.
betrayed and that they were turning their backs on me. And I told her that. And she said, I'm not turning my back on you. I need you to heal. I need you to continue going to counseling, because I was doing biblical counseling. And then the enemy is always listening. There's these things called monitoring spirits, and they just sit around listening and report back to Satan. We tell him how to torture and torment us because of the words out of our mouth, because he's always listening. I was in counseling. I got this work from home job, and the plan was for me to work from home for however long and heal and do counseling and do the things and then come back to work. But what I didn't realize is that, oh, now I can't afford to work there because it's a ministry and they don't pay a lot of money. And without my husband's income, I can't afford to live on that. You can't really afford to live on that with a mortgage and credit cards and animals
Yep.
and all the things. And um I told my counselor one day, I said, I am so sick of all this pain. Like, this is the most gut wrenching pain that I've ever felt, ever. Like, and I'm not even hurt. Like, there's nothing physically wrong with me, and I'm in so much pain on some days. It's all I can do to get out of bed. I can't breathe. I can't function. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm sick of it. I just want to feel something else, even for just a moment. So at this point, I'm either going to use, but I'm too stubborn to use. So I'm not going to do that because I've come way too far to go backwards. Or I just want to have sex. Like, that's it. I just want to have sex with, 5 minutes. Just let me feel something else for 5 minutes. And the enemy heard me say that. And I mean, he served up this man to me on a silver platter. I didn't even leave my house. I met him in my living room. My roommate at the time, he it was her brother. And he was a walking, talking red flag. And when I give my testimony, I say he came in with a red flag outfit on, with a red flag hat, doing a red flag dance. And I did not care because
You just wanted to feel something else.
he was a
Yeah.
distraction. I just wanted to feel something else. He was a distraction, and I wasn't devastatingly tied up and knotted up with all this pain. He knew what he was doing, and he did it well, with the manipulation and everything. And this was about a year later. And so I know everybody in my life was probably like, oh dear God, she has lost her mind. And I had, for all intents and purposes. And he asked me to marry him, and I was going to marry him. And then he relapsed on meth, and oh my God, it turned him into an absolute nightmare. I tried to get him to go to counseling with me, and unbeknownst to me, I had taken him out of rehab. I did all the things that I knew better than to do, but I was too broken to be able to make good decisions. And I had taken him out of rehab because he wanted to leave, and the Foundry had called Melinda, and they were like, "We're really worried about your girl. We're worried for her safety with this man because we don't think that she knows who he really is." Meantime, my counselor, there was a guy and a girl counselor, and after our first session, the guy counselor says to the girl counselor, she needs to leave him or he's going to kill her. And later on, after all this year and a half of trauma, I go back to counseling with them, and she tells me this, and I'm like, why would you not tell me that? And she's like, Holly, you
Yeah,
wouldn't have
you
heard
didn't want to
me.
hear it at the
There was
time.
no way you were listening. You weren't going to hear
Yeah.
that. I finally, after 9 months of absolute sheer agony and torture and abuse in every way, um, I'll never forget it. I was sitting at the desk working, and the Lord was all over me to get rid of him. And I said, okay, okay, I'm going to call Melinda as soon as I get off work. And I promise you, within 5 minutes, my phone dinged, and it was Melinda. Are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not. Because at this point, I had called off our wedding. I had called off the shower the day before. And I said, what made you reach out to me to ask me if I was okay? And she said, the Lord told me you needed me. And I said, I'm absolutely not okay. We need to meet as soon as possible, and I need a plan to get this man out of my house. And I sent her the pictures of my bruises, because I was covered in bruises and a busted elbow and a torn apart bed and holes in the door and, everything else. And before we went and met for dinner. We were going to try to formulate a plan. And then before we could even get there, he absolutely lost his mind one day and told me he was going to burn my house down with me in it, and if I came any closer to him, he was going to beat me within an inch of my life. And I said, "You get out. You've got to go." And I was scared to death of him because he was 6'4", 250 pounds. I mean, he was
Mm.
huge. I'm 5 foot tall. I mean, you can't tell in this video, but I'm very short. Now, I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Don't get me wrong, but not in that
Right.
season. I wasn't. In that season, I was broken. Um, and so I made him leave, and he kept trying to come back, and I called the police. And I mean, it was, he hacked my phone account, kept turning his phone off. Every time I turned it off, he would turn it on. um, Tried to get the neighbor to come down here and cut my power and internet. And I mean, it was spying on me through my cameras, hacked my camera system. Like, it had his sister calling me. I had to go to the St. Clair County Sheriff's Office and file a order of protection. I had a copy in my house. I had a copy in my car, in my purse.
Good night.
I mean, like, he would not leave me alone. It was a nightmare. So after all of that, I started back to counseling. I started back to church. I did a 12-step study. I did the Freedom Group through Church of the Highlands that landed me in the Freedom Conference. I went through Deliverance, and this Deliverance was totally different than the first one. And I'm telling you that Jesus Christ literally came into that room and set me free. I have never experienced anything like it. We went through this whole 3-hour session, and went through all the sexual impurity and all of the things, and the soul ties and the generational curses and all the things. And at the very end, after 3 hours, this amazing session, this two girls, one on one side doing all the talking, one on the other. She said the way we do it is, we go in and we ask Jesus, what is it that you want me to forgive this person of? You let Jesus speak to you and tell you, and then that's what we forgive
Mm-hmm.
them for. Once you forgive them and you break that, then the environment becomes inhospitable, and then we just tell them to go, and they go. I was like, okay. So we did all of that. It was beautiful. It wasn't, the earth didn't move. I didn't feel anything like I did the first time I had done Deliverance. And I was just like, well, if nothing else, this was, a beautiful experience. It's at the very end. I got one girl doing all the talking, one girl doing all the praying, and our heads are bowed, eyes are closed. And this girl over here that did all the talking, just as soft as you can be, said, Holly, look at me. And I opened my eyes and I lifted my head and I looked at her. And my peripheral vision, I couldn't see anything. Everything went black. The only thing I could see was her face. And her face was completely lit up, like there were
Mm-hmm.
spotlights under her chin. And she pointed her finger at me and she said, Spirit of rejection, come out of her in the name of Jesus Christ. No, no, I said, leave now. And it started in my chest. And it was the most god awful pain I've ever felt, like physical pain I've ever felt in my life. And it started in my chest and went up through my neck. And it felt like somebody was choking me. I had tears streaming down my face, but I wasn't crying. My eyes were burning. My face was on fire. I mean, I was like, what the crap is happening right now? And it lasted about 20 seconds. And as soon as it started, it was over. And I looked at her and I was like, whoa, my God. And she was like, that's it, it's over, you're okay. And I tell people all the time, Jesus Christ literally came into that room and set me free from rejection, and it changed my life. Like, my biggest fear in life has always been, what if it's not real? What if it's not real? What if this is all just stuff that they've told us from years and years and years and years and decades and centuries? Because we suck as a people. We suck. Humans are awful. And what if this is just things that they've told us so that we're not so awful to each other, so that we'll be good? That's been my
Yeah.
biggest fear. And in that moment, in that 20-second moment, Jesus Christ literally blew every doubt, every fear, everything I had out of the water. I know that I know that I know when I die, I will see Jesus. I know that I know that I know that it's all real and that I will get to see Roger again one day. And I know that he'll be standing there waiting for me on that guardrail, which is what he told me. There were some people that came to our house and they told me this wild story about how all these people come and stand around the bed and reassure the person before they die. And I don't know what your relationship with Jesus is like. So if you tell me that Jesus said something to you, I can't say it
Right.
didn't happen. This lady's telling me all these things and I'm like, okay, cool. Because she said that, when your loved one is dying, all of their loved ones come and stand before them that have already died and gone to heaven, and they reassure them and tell them that everything's going to be okay and not to worry and yada yada yada. Okay. Well, one day I was outside 2 driveways down. Roger was inside heavily medicated. He was not hearing this conversation, and I didn't tell him about it. I come downstairs one morning and I'm like, good morning, because he wanted his hospital bed downstairs in the living room in the window so he could see out the window. And he's like, good morning. And he's like, where'd everybody go? And I was like, what? Because this woman said, it's literally a room full of people. And I said, what are you talking about? Where'd everybody go? We haven't had visitors in 3 days. And he said, I'm walking to the kitchen to go get breakfast. And he says, no, it was literally a room full of people. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And I turned around and I said, what did you say? And he said, it was literally a room full of people. Like, this whole room was full of people. And I was like, Roger, have you seen anything? Have you seen anybody? Have you seen your dad? Have you seen Jesus? Have you seen your grandmother? Like, have you seen anything? Have you seen heaven? And he was like, no. No, none of that. Nothing like that. Just the door. And I was like, the door? The pearly gates? And he was like, no, it wasn't the pearly gates. It was just a door. It was the biggest door I've ever seen. It's as tall as you can see, and it's huge and thick, and it's just this beautiful, big ornate wood door. And on either side of it, this guardrail like thing comes out on either side, and these two huge warrior angels stand on either side of the guard. They stand on the guardrail.
Wow.
And he looked up at me and he said, in fact, that's where I'm going to meet you when it's your turn on that guard.
Wow.
So I know that I will see him again when it's my turn. He asked me before he died, he said, I want you to do one thing for me. I want you to make me a promise. I said, okay, what is that? What you got? He said, after I die, I want you to tell my story. I want you to tell people what happened, because what do we all think? We think it won't happen to me. That's a terrible story, but it won't happen to me. Well, it did happen to me. And he lost his life over a cigarette. And so I share his story as often as I can, because I want other people to know that it will happen to you. And it does happen, and it's not just lung cancer. I can't tell you how many times I sat there and listened to him beg God to get one bite of grits to go down, because he hadn't had any solid food in weeks. Begging God, please, Lord, just let this one bite of grits go down. I'm starving. I'm so hungry, God, please. Over a cigarette. It's not
We all
worth it.
think we're invincible until we're not.
Amen.
Well,
Amen.
thank you for sharing all of that. Your story, his story.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's incredible is not the right word, because by definition it means it's not credible, but it's, like, it almost seems unbelievable. It's so just, I don't want to use the word traumatic, but
it was
is
absolutely
traumatic.
the most traumatic experience of my life.
So I mean, thank you for being open and willing to share that
Absolutely.
with whoever, might see this or listen to this forever.
Yeah.
Because it'll be on the internet. So
Amen.
the goal is to.
Well, there is one thing I want to share with you. When we were talking about not loving ourselves, I heard something the other day. Take the 5 lies that Satan has lied to you about yourself the most in your life, the top 5. Write them down. Then go in the Bible and find the opposite of whatever that is. Find the truth that's the opposite of what the lie is. Write those 5 things down, the scriptures. Start speaking them over yourself every morning, and it will rewire the neural pathways in your brain to believe those instead of
Which
the
is
lies.
true, by the way.
Yeah.
Studies, and
Yeah.
she already knows, I can tell by the
Yeah.
look on her face, but studies have shown that the things in your brain that make it all squiggly and weird looking,
Yeah.
those are neural pathways. Those are the thing. And if you retrain, the Bible says that by the renewal of our mind.
Yeah.
And even scientifically speaking, we can reprogram our brain and renew it depending on what we feed it and what we tell it.
That's what your dad was telling me the other day, because I've got some help stuff of my own going on. I actually got to go tomorrow for a exam for them to look at everything, and then if they see anything suspicious, they're going to do a biopsy. And but I was freaking out about it because his dad was also just diagnosed with a type of cancer too. So, and then his mom also was just diagnosed with a thing called PSP, which is essentially dementia and Parkinson's put together. So it's just been like all of these things. He's still got his own health stuff from last year. They still don't know what happened to him when he got all the shots in the military. So it's just a lot going on. And I was talking to his dad about it. The way that the doctor was telling me, he said that it's not nothing I need to worry about now, but this stuff that it's happening is precancerous, so it could eventually, if I don't stay on top of it. So with all of that stuff going on,
I'll definitely be praying for you guys.
And and us for you too.
Yeah, we will for you too. But with all of the stuff going on, I was talking to his dad because I was freaking out about a lot of it, which I felt bad freaking out about it because, he's dealing with his own thing, with his own diagnosis. And he's sitting there trying to calm me down. And he said, that kind of like what y'all were saying, that if I keep thinking that the worst possible thing is going to happen and keep feeding myself all these horrible things,
it's going to happen.
Then that's what's going to happen. And he had just got done saying the same stuff to me the night before. So I'm having to retrain my brain stay away from Google, quit Googling the stuff that it could be.
And
just,
she is the
definitely
worst
don't
about
Google
that.
it.
She goes to Dr. Google about everything.
Well, especially since I found out about Grok.
That's the worst possible
Yeah.
thing you
She's
should
over
do.
here.
Grok now.
Oh, the Google says I could have a brain tumor. It's called allergies, and it's a pressure headache. Take some Claritin. Be quiet.
So it's just
Yeah.
yeah. He doesn't deal with my hypochondria. He just gets mad.
I don't get mad. I
Well-
just don't take it.
Look, when Roger got diagnosed, Melinda called me the next morning on my way to work. Hey, have you Googled what he has? And I was like, no, ma'am.
Yeah.
She said, don't.
Yeah, just
I was like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Now
Just
I've got
leave
to.
that.
Yeah. That's what we did as soon as his mom, like when they first started talking about the diagnosis with her. That's the first thing we've done for like the past, because it's been about a year that they've been bouncing around saying, well, we think it's this, but then
Oh
we
no,
don't.
it's been 8 years.
No, I'm talking about like this specific
Oh
diagnosis.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been 8 years for them to be able to figure out what's wrong with her, but this specific diagnosis, it's been about a year that she's gotten it. But the doctors have been so wishy-washy. Well, we think it's this.
Well, it's so rare; it's hard
Yeah.
to tell. No, I think 11 out of 100,000 people get it.
Yeah.
So
Like-
they just don't know a whole lot about it.
UAB, they finally looked at all of his stuff, all of her stuff, and said, yes, that is what it is.
You know, that kind of sounds like, woo, compared to what
Well, I know, but
they've been, she's been through, and
Well, everybody's got stuff,
Yeah.
though.
yeah,
You've got to stay on top of it. You've got to be your own advocate
Right.
because the medical community, I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's gonna go to bat for you more than you
Exactly.
will. And I learned that you've got to be your advocate. You've got to be his
Exactly.
advocate. One thing somebody taught me was to get a notebook, take it with you to every
Mhm.
appointment, write everything they say down because you will forget, and that way you can look back at your notes. And then also, if you have questions, what I discovered was that I would have all these questions, and then I'd get in the doctor's appointment, and my mind would
Yeah.
go
that's
blank.
what that's.
So
what I do.
as I had a question, I would write it down, write
Yeah.
it down, write it down. Then when I get to the doctor's appointment, I can just read
Yeah.
all the questions off my list to write the answers down. But you have to be your own
Yeah.
advocate these days because people really
They
just
re-
don't
they
care.
really don't. They really don't. It'll get sorted out, and
Yeah.
it'll all be what it's supposed to be, and
Yeah.
we'll go on.
Keep me posted. I will definitely be praying for you
Yeah,
guys.
thank
Yeah, well,
you.
we'll be praying for you, and thank you again for sharing, and we'll let
Absolutely.
you know when this goes out. Ties it. I can't say the past tense of edit. I get
Edited.
stuck on it, so I just say editized. But
And it'll
Okay.
probably be a 2-part since it's
Words are hard.
words are hard. English sucks.
since it's 2 hours long. We'll probably do a 2-part one too. So it'll probably be next week, right, when it gets posted? Because don't we have one already for this week?
Already posted mine for this week.
Okay, so then it'll be next week. We do them a week out, so it'll be the first part will be next week, and then we'll probably split it up to where Roger's story is its own part for the second part.
Okay.
Yeah.
He'll have his own
Sounds good.
little video.
But thank you.
All right.
It was good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for
You're
having
of
me.
welcome.
course.
Thank you.
Proud of you.
Thank you.
Super proud of you,
Thank you.
Christina. All right. Y'all
You
have a
too.
good night.
Bye.
That's terrible with Roger, though.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was that bad with Roger
yeah,
neither.
No,
I just only knew about the esophageal, how do you say that word? Esophageal cancer. And a lot of the ladies, they actually started doing a thing to promote not smoking in Roger's honor. So a lot of the women at Love Lady stopped smoking.
and that's what happened with my brother's dad.
Yeah.
It wasn't the smoking, but he had cancer. He
Mhm.
went through the treatment.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
He was in remission. He went back to if I remember right, he went back to his last appointment to get declared cancer free, and they found a little spot on his scan.
Yeah.
2 months later, he was dead. Well, that's all for this one, and you'll be seeing this part at the end of part 2, obviously, because it's a 2-parter. Because we're at 2 hours 4 minutes and 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Are you having trouble with words?
I'm having trouble with numbers. I'm dyslexic, and I'm also very tired. But thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next time. I'm Dylan.
I'm Chris.
Bye.
Bye.
This is the absolute worst chemo I've ever done in my entire life. I just love you so much, Holly. You don't have any idea how much I love you. I would try to bend time and earth for you. I would do anything in this world for you. Because you are the love of my life. And I know I didn't always show it. I tried. I really tried. I love you so much. Hey! And I'm fixing to go because the tears are fixing to come and we don't need that. I love you.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you so much. Good morning. I love you, Holly. You're the light of my world, baby. You are everything to me. I love you so much. Everything I do, I try to do for you. I want to look my best for you. I want to act my best for you. I want to be my best for you. Because you make me want to be better. I love you, baby.